Listen up, because in 1975, Return to the Planet of the Apes wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon.
Return to the Planet of the Apes!
This was NBC's attempt to capitalize on one of the biggest science fiction franchises of the era, featuring surprisingly sophisticated animation for Saturday mornings, tackling themes like nuclear war, racism, and class struggle. And actually adapting Pierre Boulle's original novel more faithfully than the famous 1968 film ever did. The show ran for exactly one season, 13 episodes, aired in NBC's Saturday morning lineup, and pulled decent ratings in its time slot. It featured apes using advanced technology, a serialized storyline that built across episodes, and genuine science fiction concepts that treated kids like they could handle complex ideas. But here's the thing. By September 1976, it was gone. Canceled after just 13 episodes, despite the Planet of the Apes brand still being hot, despite merchandising opportunities, despite everything pointing toward renewal. And it would never be revived, never get a second season, and would fade into obscurity so completely that most people don't even know it existed. So what the hell happened? How did a cartoon based on one of the most valuable science fiction properties of the 1970s, a franchise that had spawned 5 movies, a live-action TV series, and massive merchandising, get killed after one season with barely a whimper? Look, if you were a Saturday morning cartoon kid in 1975, you might remember this show. You remember being confused because the apes had flying machines and computers when the movies showed them living primitively. You remember astronauts Bill, Jeff, and Judy crash landing on future Earth. You remember this being way more serialized and complicated than typical Saturday fare. So buckle up, because this is about how you take a billion-dollar franchise and somehow screw it up on Saturday morning television. How Planet of the Apes came to Saturday mornings. All right, so here's something most people don't realize. By 1975, Planet of the Apes was one of the most valuable entertainment properties in the world. The 1968 film had been a massive hit. 4 sequels followed between 1970 and 1973. A live-action TV series aired on CBS in 1974 for one season. There were comic books, novels, action figures, Halloween costumes. Planet of the Apes merchandise was everywhere. 20th Century Fox was milking this franchise for everything it was worth. And in 1974, they looked at Saturday morning and saw another opportunity. Kids loved the apes. Why not make a cartoon? They partnered with Deepachi Freleng Enterprises, an animation studio known for the Pink Panther cartoons and various Saturday morning shows. Deepachi Freleng had a reputation for relatively high-quality limited animation and working efficiently within tight budgets. The pitch to NBC was simple: capitalize on the Planet of the Apes brand with a Saturday morning cartoon that would appeal to kids who'd seen the movies and attract new young viewers. NBC greenlit it for the 1975-76 season. But here's where things got interesting. Instead of just adapting the movies, the creative team decided to go back to Pierre Boulle's original 1963 novel, La Planète des Singes, Planet of the Apes. And in that novel, the apes weren't primitive. They had advanced technology, cities, vehicles, computers, aircraft. The novel's ape society was scientifically advanced, not regressed. This was a bold choice. The movies had established apes as primitive because of budget constraints. Showing advanced ape civilization in live action would have been prohibitively expensive in the late 60s. But in animation, you could draw anything. So why not show the apes as Boule originally envisioned them? The creative team also made another ambitious choice: serialization. Instead of episodic adventures that reset each week, Return to the Planet of the Apes would tell one continuous story across 13 episodes. The astronauts, Bill Hudson, Jeff Allen, and Judy Franklin, would crash on future Earth and spend the season trying to survive, understand this world, and eventually discover the truth about what happened to humanity. This was sophisticated storytelling for Saturday morning 1975. Most cartoons were simple, episodic, and reset completely each week. Return to the Planet of the Apes was attempting something closer to a serialized novel. The show premiered on NBC in September 1975 in the Saturday morning lineup, and the initial response was mixed. Critics appreciated the ambition and the faithfulness to Boulet's novel. Kids who were Planet of the Apes fans were intrigued by seeing advanced ape technology. The ratings were respectable, not spectacular, but solid enough for a first-season show. But there were immediate problems visible to anyone paying attention. Problems that would doom the show before it ever had a chance to find its audience. The animation was painfully cheap, even by Saturday morning standards. Here's the brutal reality that undermined Return to the Planet of the Apes. The animation was terrible. Depatie Freleng was working with an extremely limited budget, estimated at around $35,000 to $40,000 per episode, which was cheap even for Saturday morning 1975. For comparison, Hanna-Barbera was spending $45,000 to $50,000 per episode on their shows at the time. That budget bought animation quality that looked cheap, rushed, and visually unappealing. We're talking about extreme limited animation taken to almost absurd levels. Characters barely moved. Most scenes were static shots with only mouths moving during dialogue. Action sequences consisted of characters sliding across backgrounds with maybe 1 or 2 frames of actual movement. The flying machines the apes used were obviously the same cell sliding across a painted sky, but the worst part was the rotoscoping. To save money, Depatie Freleng rotoscoped extensively, tracing over live-action footage to create animation. This technique can work when done well, but when done cheaply, it creates this weird, stiff, uncanny valley effect where characters move sort of realistically, but also completely wrong. Return to the Planet of the Apes used cheap rotoscoping for character movement, and it looked terrible. Characters walked with this strange, stilted gait. Action scenes felt slow and awkward. The whole thing had this low-budget, corner-cutting aesthetic that screamed, "We don't have enough money to make this properly." And here's what makes this especially frustrating. The show was trying to depict advanced ape civilization with technology, vehicles, and cities. But the animation was so limited that none of it looked impressive or believable. The flying machines looked like cardboard cutouts. The ape cities looked like paintings with no depth or life. The technology looked static and fake. If the budget had been higher, if they'd invested in better animation, the concept of technologically advanced apes could have been visually spectacular. Instead, it looked cheap and boring. Kids watching could tell this was low-quality stuff. It didn't compare favorably to other cartoons airing at the same time. Even shows with limited animation like Scooby-Doo had more visual appeal and better character animation. Return to the Planet of the Apes looked like a show made on a shoestring budget, and that undermined everything else it was trying to accomplish. The serialization was too complex for Saturday morning, 1975. Here's the creative decision that confused and alienated the audience. The show was too serialized for its time slot and era. The entire 13-episode season told one continuous story. Episode 1, astronauts crash on future Earth. Episode 2, they're captured by apes. Episode 3, they escape and meet sympathetic ape scientists. Episode 4, they learn about ape society's class divisions, and so on, building week by week toward revelations about what happened to humanity and why apes now rule the planet. This structure works great for binge-watching or for adult dramas, but for Saturday morning cartoons in 1975, it was a disaster. Here's the problem. Kids didn't watch every single episode in order. Maybe they slept in one Saturday. Maybe their family went somewhere. Maybe the local NBC affiliate preempted the show for local programming. Missing one episode meant being lost when they tuned in the next week, and there was no VCR, no way to catch up, no recap episodes. If you missed an episode, you were just confused. Most Saturday morning shows understood this and made each episode work as a standalone. Sure, there might be recurring characters and general continuity, but each episode told a complete story. You could watch episode 5 without having seen episodes 1 to 4 and still understand what was happening. Return to the Planet of the Apes didn't do that. Each episode ended on cliffhangers or unresolved plot threads. Characters made reference to events from previous episodes. The ongoing mystery of what happened to Earth required following the entire season. Kids who missed episodes stopped watching because they couldn't follow the story. Kids who tuned in mid-season were confused and didn't stick around. The serialization that was supposed to be a strength became a liability. The show needed either to commit fully to serialization with recaps and better audience education about watching in order, or it needed to pull back and make episodes more standalone. Instead, it got stuck in this middle ground where it was too serialized for casual viewing but not serialized enough to really deliver complex storytelling payoffs. By mid-season, ratings were declining, not because kids didn't like the show, but because they were confused by it. The Planet of the Apes brand was already dying. This is the factor nobody at NBC or 20th Century Fox wanted to acknowledge. By 1975, the Planet of the Apes franchise was exhausted. The live-action TV series that had aired in 1974 had been canceled after just 14 episodes despite decent ratings. Why? Because it was expensive to produce, and the audience was shrinking. People were getting tired of Planet of the Apes content. 5 movies in 5 years, 1968 to 1973, had saturated the market. The quality had declined with each sequel. Battle for the Planet of the Apes in 1973 was a critical and commercial disappointment. The franchise was showing fatigue. Merchandising was declining. The action figures that had sold well in 1974 were sitting on shelves by 1975. Retailers were discounting Planet of the Apes toys and merchandise because demand was dropping. Return to the Planet of the Apes premiered into this declining market. It wasn't that the show itself was bad, it was that kids were already moving on from Planet of the Apes as a franchise. The cultural moment had passed. NBC looked at the ratings and saw a show performing okay, but not great. They looked at the broader franchise performance and saw decline across the board. They looked at their budget allocations and saw other properties with more potential. When renewal time came in early 1976, NBC passed, not because Return to the Planet of the Apes had failed dramatically, but because the entire Planet of the Apes franchise was in decline and NBC didn't want to invest in it further. The show was canceled as part of a broader retreat from Planet of the Apes content. 20th Century Fox stopped producing new Planet of the Apes material for years. The franchise went dormant until Tim Burton's 2001 remake film. Return to the Planet of the Apes was killed by bad timing, arriving just as the franchise it was based on was dying. The show nobody remembers. Here's what makes Return to the Planet of the Apes particularly tragic. It's been almost completely forgotten. The 1968 film is a classic. The sequels are cult films with dedicated fan bases. Even the 1974 live-action TV series has nostalgia appeal and gets discussed in Planet of the Apes retrospectives. But the 1975 cartoon? Most people don't even know it exists. It never got a proper home video release until the 2000s. It wasn't syndicated in reruns. It didn't air on cable. For decades, it was essentially unavailable. You couldn't watch it even if you wanted to. When the modern Planet of the Apes reboot films started in 2011, there was zero reference to the 1975 cartoon. No special features on Blu-rays, no retrospective articles, nothing. It's been erased from the franchise history. And that's a shame because despite its flaws, the cheap animation, the over-serialization, the bad timing, Return to the Planet of the Apes was actually trying to do something interesting. It was more faithful to Pierre Boulle's original novel than the films were. It tackled themes of class struggle, scientific ethics, and environmental catastrophe. It treated kids like they could handle complex science fiction concepts. It deserved better than to be completely forgotten. When ambition meets insufficient resources. So here's the thing about Return to the Planet of the Apes. It tried to do sophisticated storytelling on a budget that couldn't support it. The creative team wanted to make something smart and serialized and faithful to the source material, but they were given a budget that could barely afford basic, limited animation, let alone the visual spectacle the concept required. They wanted to show technologically advanced ape civilization, but the animation couldn't make it look impressive. They wanted to tell a complex serialized story, but the Saturday morning format wasn't ready for that level of continuity. They wanted to capitalize on the Planet of the Apes brand, but the brand was already dying. Every creative ambition was undercut by practical limitations. And you know what? that's not the creative team's fault. They were trying to make the best show possible within the constraints they were given. The fault lies with NBC and 20th Century Fox for not providing adequate resources. If Return to the Planet of the Apes had been given a budget comparable to prime animated shows of the era, $60,000 to $75,000 per episode instead of $35,000 to $40,000, the animation could have been good enough to sell the concept visually. If it had been positioned as a limited series event instead of just another Saturday morning show, the serialization could have worked because audiences would have known to watch every episode. If it had launched in 1973 when the Planet of the Apes brand was still hot, instead of 1975 when it was cooling, it might have found a bigger audience. But none of those things happened. The show got inadequate budget, poor positioning, and bad timing. It failed not because the concept was bad, but because the execution couldn't match the ambition due to factors outside the creative team's control. So that's the rise and fall of Return to the Planet of the Apes, a show that tried to do something ambitious with Saturday morning animation, that attempted to adapt Pierre Boulle's original vision more faithfully than the films, and that got killed by cheap animation, over-serialization, and terrible franchise timing. If you actually remember watching Return to the Planet of the Apes in 1975 and weren't just confused about why the apes had spaceships, you're a rare breed. Drop a comment and tell me if you understood what was happening or just thought it was a weird Planet of the Apes thing. I bet most of you were just there because apes are cool. And if you're not subscribed yet, there's a lot more forgotten animation history where this came from.